Dynasty Owners, it's Matt the Jerk here with your Wednesday video breakdown. So today we're going to continue with our series and do some blind comparisons. Today we're going to be talking about the New England Patriots. So the Patriots, just a little background on them for the 2020 season. We all know they had a pretty disappointing season. The NFL fans at all are used to seeing out of them. In fact, I break this down a little bit in my article, but I put some stats up there, some streaks that were broken with this recent season. So here, I'll read them for you. The Patriots had won the NFC East for 11 consecutive seasons, dating back to 2008. That was snapped as they did not win the AFC East. They had not lost more than 6 games since 2003. That was obviously snapped when they lost 9 games. They had not finished below 500 in the regular season since 2000, so we're going back a couple decades for that one. And the Patriots had not finished lower than second in the AFC East since 2000, so another couple decade one. Highlights how poor of a season they had. And when you think about it, it really wasn't that 7-9. It's not what anybody wants. It's not what any team wants unless they're fully rebuilding, which the Patriots might have been doing. But it's just the fact that we've come to expect success out of them pretty much every season for what they've done. They built a dynasty over the past 20 years, and dynasties, I break this down a little bit further in my article. Go ahead and read that to read more about it. But dynasties come to an end at some point, so it all depends on how much success you wanna have during that dynasty to rebuild for a few seasons. And obviously, what they've done since 2000 has been worth it. Since '99, it's been worth it. To rebuild for 1 season, 2 seasons. I don't know how long this is going to last, but and then obviously Tom Brady going to another team and winning the Super Bowl in that first season is kind of disappointing, I'm sure, for a Patriots fan to see. But regardless, let's jump into some comparisons right off the bat, and I'm going to screen share with you guys here so we can go through this together. So what we're going to be doing, I'm going to continue with my series of showing you one player, a player's name, and then giving you a player to compare them with their stats. So who would you rather own in Dynasty Owner? First player is Alpha. It's Damian Harris, so he's our Patriots player, sticking with the Patriots theme. And then we have Bravo, player B. He is 23 years old. Here's his 2020 stats. Right at 9 fantasy points per game. If he'd have played all 16 games, he'd have had 142.5 fantasy points. 156 rushes, 38 receptions, almost 1,000 total yards, 2 touchdowns, and he missed no games in 2020, so that's actually completely accurate, all those stats. And then his 2021 projected stats, right about the same. So 9.1 fantasy points per game, 154.7 total. And the reason for that difference there, the 154 compared to the 142, that's just because we were having a 17-game season next year. So had to divide by 1 more than we're with these this new schedule, this new season. So, and then 2021 projected 154 rushes, 36 receptions, right at about 1,000 total yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's right on track for what he did last year. At least they projected him for the same thing in 2021. So what are your initial thoughts? And I'll take you off the screenshot here since we don't need more stats. What are your initial thoughts on that? My thoughts are that Harris didn't have a good season. He didn't have as good a season as Bravo, I should say. And that's true. But that's also a little misleading when you look at how many games each played. So Bravo played all 16 games in 2020, and Harris only played 10. So if you remember, he was hurt at the beginning of the season. I believe he missed a few games at the very end of the season too. So he missed a total of 6 games. So let's look at how their 16-game season would have looked. I'll bring this back up for you. So this is how it would have looked if they would have both played all 16. Obviously, we said that Bravo did play all, but if Harris would have played, he actually had a better season value-wise, average-wise. And here's the full numbers. So Harris is 1 year older, average 0.7 points per game more than Bravo. Let's see, about 60 more rushes, 70 more rushes, more total yards by about 200 touchdown. And then you look at the salary. Salary is kind of negligible. I mean, you're going to want that extra 70,000 for something else, save on another player, but negligible as far as I'm concerned for this comparison. So what are we thinking? We're thinking that Harris, did better on noting, like I said, that Harris' salary is slightly less. Negligible as far as I'm concerned, but some of you might be looking at that if you're trying to squeeze right under the cap. And in my opinion, Harris actually had a pretty productive rookie season. A lot of people forget that was his rookie season. In 2020, he actually ranked third among all New England running backs in terms of total fantasy points. That might be hard to believe. I mean, you missed 6 games. It's bound to happen. But he was third behind James White and Rex Burkhead. So Burkhead squeezed in right in front of him. That's obviously it's not going to happen next year. Burkhead's not with the team. And I don't expect James White to beat him. I think Harris will lead the Patriots in fantasy points. So in the end, I'll go ahead and tell you that Bravo is Devin Singletary. So kind of sticking with, we did the week, kind of sticking with the Bills, Patriots, this whole division theme. So Singletary, if you remember, if you played last year, he was regularly drafted in the second or third rounds. I remember him going early second in some of the drafts, some of the mock drafts that I did. And his stock has obviously fallen over the past year. I'm not going to be surprised if he goes later in the 4th round in 2021 startups. And it's mainly Zach Moss. I mean, he's going to take over a lot of the touches coming into 2021. He took over a lot of the touches in 2020, so there's no reason that shouldn't continue. I would draft Harris over Devin this coming year. He also has one more year as he's on that, was on that rookie contract. He's got 3 more years, Harris does. So I expect him to come into the season completely healthy and hopefully be able to take over the majority of that role as they start to rebuild. Of the day. Let's see what we got here. I'll bring up the stats for you. So we have Charlie. He is 26 years old. That's 8.7 fantasy points per game, 56 receptions, 535 total yards, 5 touchdowns. He missed 3 games in 2020. 2021 projected, 9.8 fantasy points per game, 65 receptions, 661 touchdowns. So pretty similar. And then we have Delta, who is Jonnu Smith. So who are you thinking that you would want out of those two? And it might be a little deceiving, but we'll go through it. So Jonnu had a better season than Charlie. That's a no-brainer. I think everybody pretty much knows how good Jonnu was. And it's almost entirely due to the fact that he had 9 touchdowns. So he had 8 receiving and 1 rushing touchdown. And that's just going to catapult, your fantasy production when you can put up anywhere close to those type of touchdowns. I'm not trying to take those away because I earn them, but we all know how fluky red zone targets, touchdowns, 10 zone targets can be. And they didn't work out for Jonnu last year. In all, Jonnu finished tight end 15 on the season. Charlie finished tight end 21. So not great for either player, really, especially when taking into account their salaries. And here's what their total salaries look like with the full break. So here's their ages. Charlie's 1 year older. And these are based on 6-game averages, like I always do. Jonnu had 10 points per game, fantasy per game. Charlie had right about 9. Jonnu had less receptions, less yards, but look at those touchdowns. He doubled them up, doubled Charlie up in terms of touchdowns. And his salary is $2 million more. So you're probably thinking, those are high salaries to pay for middle-of-the-road tight ends at best. And I agree with you. I don't think that anybody would argue that there's value in either of these players. Jonnu was able to salvage a season based on his touchdowns, and if you had him, you were happy. But you weren't happy. You're not going to be happy this coming season with that big jump in salary. So, I'm going to tell you right now, Charlie Hooper missed 3 games last year, but even in the games he played, he was unable to be started. At least be a trustable fantasy starter in about games. So he had 6.3 fantasy points or less in 6 games last year. And that's just, it's not going to get it done. It might get it done on your bench tight end, but it's not going to get it done for your starting tight end. So the question still stands, who would you rather own? But at this point, I'd rather have Hooper. And that's for 2 main reasons. One is the elephant in the room, which I haven't mentioned yet, is the fact that Jonnu is going to be splitting targets. He's going to be splitting snaps with Hunter Henry. We know that they both signed with the Patriots in the offseason. So what do you think the most optimistic split between those two is? And my opinion is that the best case scenario for either one is that they get a 75-25 split for either side. So if that's in Jonnu's favor, then I think he could be a startable, dynasty owner tight end. But that's a big if. I see it working more like a committee. I think it'll be closer to 50-50, maybe 60-40, but I don't think it's going to be anything further than that. I think 75-25 is on the extreme end. And if that's the case, I don't see how really any of these three tight ends are going to return value, especially Hunter and Jonnu. We just know that they're not going to see the field as much as, other high salary tight ends like Waller, Kelsey. They're just not going to have that type of volume. And that's why they're middle of the road tight ends. That's why they're not in that tier. I feel like Jonnu could have gotten there. He's athletic enough to get there, but he's just going to be hampered by, all the players around him taking targets from him. And the second factor, I said there were two. The second factor is simply the fact that Jonnu costs $2 million more per year. You can save that $2 million. Like I said, the $70,000, that's negligible as far as I'm concerned when it comes to a player. But it's not when it's $2 million. It's quite a bit of money. And you can save, that's a whole one player, two player if you need it, especially later on when you're drafting. So I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about. For this comparison, I would take Hooper, like I said. But my hope is that I would have a better option that I can take in the draft earlier. That could be my tight end one. It's just a lot of money. Over $10 million to pay for a middle to lower tier tight end. It's probably not going to get it done. And you're going to be at a biggest disadvantage when you go up against, especially the Waller owners, because, he's pretty cheap, but Waller, Kittle, Kelsey, you're just going to be at an extreme disadvantage every week if you play those guys just because they're so reliable. So anyway, I appreciate everybody watching. Be sure to check out the article. Go ahead and read that if you have time. And I will see you all next